What if everything you call discipline is just self-deception? You're not breaking habits, you're performing them. Which habit are you lying about changing?
Man, that is a profoundly uncomfortable thought to sit with right out of the gate.
I mean, we really have to hit the ground
We
running.
do, yeah, because we all operate under this grand ego-driven illusion that we're completely in control of our daily actions, you know?
Through just raw, unfiltered willpower.
Hey, just trying harder.
Exactly. But the reality is, it's much more mechanical than that. It's systemic. And honestly, it's deeply unconscious. Like, you aren't really making choices a lot of the time. You're just executing code.
Which is exactly why we're here today. We are doing a deep dive into the literal architecture of our own behavior. We've got the complete unofficial workbook for atomic habits in front of us, obviously based on James Clear's foundational work.
A fantastic resource. It really is.
Yeah.
But we have a very specific mission for this deep dive. We are completely stripping away that generic, feel good, just try harder tomorrow advice that absolutely litters the self-help industry.
Because it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. So we're going to take you, the listener, on this complete philosophical and frankly brutal psychological journey through the mechanics of how humans actually operate.
I love that approach because relying on willpower alone is, like you said, the ultimate self-deception. Biologically, psychologically, we are just wired to crave simple, narrative-driven solutions.
Oh, for sure. We want the movie montage.
Right. We want to believe that just wanting something badly enough or having some massive breakthrough moment will magically rewrite our lives. But if you look at the mechanics, willpower is a finite resource. It's highly unreliable. It's metabolically expensive.
It drains you.
It really does. When we lean on it, we inevitably fail. So the real solution lies in understanding these hidden systems that govern us often entirely without our permission.
So let's lay out the structure for this deep dive. If you're listening right now, maybe you're driving, maybe doing the dishes, we're going to deconstruct the exact actions you are taking right now.
Break it all down.
Yeah. We were moving from foundations.
Yeah.
So why habits feel literally impossible to change into mechanics, where we diagram how these behavioral loops work in your neurology. And finally, transformation, which is all about identity-based change.
It's a full journey.
But before we hit those foundations, I have to ask you, why is it that we can so easily spot the bad habits of our friends or family, right? But when it comes to our own stuff, we act like we're fighting invisible demons.
Yeah, that's such a common blind spot. It really comes down to psychological proximity and, well, ego preservation.
Ego preservation, okay.
Right, because when we look at someone else's habits, we're on the outside. We see the objective mechanism, we see the trigger, the routine, the consequence, all with absolute detached clarity.
Like if a friend complains about being broke, but orders DoorDash every night.
Exactly. The math is completely obvious to you. But our own habits, they are so entangled with our ego and our carefully constructed identity. We are basically too close to the canvas to see the painting.
Oh, that makes sense. We don't see our own actions as mechanical loops.
No, we see them as personal flaws, or we blame insurmountable environmental challenges. We basically grant ourselves a level of narrative complexity that we just completely deny everyone else.
We totally narrativize our bad habits to justify them. Like, I'm not lazy, I'm just overwhelmed with my creative genius. Or, I don't have a sugar addiction, I need a little reward after a stressful day.
Yeah, it's a built-in defense mechanism.
Which perfectly brings us to part 1 of the workbook, Foundations, and the psychology of this self-deception. There's this incredible historical example in there about the British cycling team and their coach, David Brailsford.
Oh, the 1% rule.
Yeah, it just absolutely dismantles the illusion that we need these massive, intimidating goals to change our lives. Can you break down the Brailsford story?
Sure. So Brailsford's approach essentially rewrites how we understand progress. He was hired to fix this British cycling team that had a staggeringly dismal record.
Like, genuinely terrible.
Oh, historically bad. They had won, I think, 1 gold medal in decades of Olympic history.
Yeah.
They were so bad that some bike manufacturers literally refused to sell them gear because they didn't want their brand seen on the team.
That is brutal.
Right. So a normal coach would come in and set these massive rallying goals like, we're going to win the Tour de France next year, guys. They focus entirely on the outcome.
But Brailsford didn't do that.
Not at all. He ignored the outcome entirely. He focused strictly on the systems. He brought in the strategy of 1% marginal gains.
And we need to pause on the math here, because human beings, our brains are notoriously terrible at understanding exponential compounding.
Oh, completely. We think in linear terms.
Right, 1 plus 1 plus 1. But Brailsford wasn't looking for a 50% improvement in one big area. He looked for a 1% improvement in, like, 100 tiny areas.
Yeah, a 1% more aerodynamic bike seat, a 1% better massage gel for muscle recovery.
I read he even had the team bring their own specific 1% better pillows to the hotels so they slept perfectly.
Yeah, he controlled every variable.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do the math on that 1% daily improvement over a year, it doesn't just add up to 365%. Because it compounds, you end up roughly 37 times better by the end of the year.
37 times.
Yeah. But conversely, if you get 1% worse every day, you decline nearly down to 0.
Mhm.
We expect progress to be linear. We want to go to the gym for a week and see abs.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Right. But those tiny, seemingly insignificant changes, they build upon each other. They store up potential energy until they cross a critical threshold and just create this massive gap in performance.
And the results were insane. During the 2008 Olympics, that British team won 60% of the gold medals available. Then they won the Tour de France 5 times in 6 years.
It's the ultimate proof that goals are finite and deeply flawed, while systems are everything.
You know, I always look at setting a goal like putting a bucket under a leaky roof in your living room.
Oh, I like that.
You catch the water, you empty the bucket, and you get this little dopamine rush like, hey, I did something. But the system, the actual mechanism is getting a ladder, going out in the rain, and fixing the actual shingles.
Exactly. The goal treats the symptom, but the system cures the disease.
Because if you achieve a goal, say you train for a marathon, the behavior usually just stops the very next day. You cross the finish line, and the motivation evaporates.
You see it all the time. Goals actually lead to regression because achieving the goal terminates the behavior that got you there in the first place.
Wow. Yeah.
Systems, however, are a perpetual engine. You aren't training for a marathon. You are building a system of daily movement. And that distinction leads into the deepest foundational philosophy in the workbook, the 3 levels of change.
Okay, lay those out for us.
So you have outcomes, which are the results you want. You have processes, which are the habits or systems you use to get there. And then at the deepest, most foundational level, you have identity, who you actually believe you are.
This part blew my mind when I really sat with it. The difference between outcomes and identity is profound. The workbook uses the example of someone trying to quit smoking.
Yes, the smoker example is perfect.
So someone offers them a cigarette. If they say, no thanks, I'm trying to quit, they're focusing on the outcome. But if they say, no thanks, I am not a smoker, they've completely shifted their identity.
It sounds like just semantics, but psychologically, it is a completely different universe.
Right.
It's a monumental shift because it forces us to ask, what does it actually mean to be someone? Your identity isn't some ethereal essence or a soul perfectly set in stone at birth. It is a fluid, entirely constructed concept built entirely out of your past actions.
So every action is basically a vote.
Exactly. Every single decision you make is a ballot cast for an identity. If you choose to wake up early, you are casting a vote for the identity of an early riser.
So the smoker who says, I'm trying to quit, still intrinsically identifies as a smoker who's merely pausing their behavior.
Right, and the friction is immense because their actions are fighting their own self-image, but saying, I am a non-smoker, fundamentally shifts the self-image to align with the desired action. True behavior change is identity change.
Okay, so every action is a vote. I skip a workout, I'm voting for couch potato, I eat the salad, I'm voting for healthy person. The majority of votes wins the election of your identity.
That's the math, yeah.
But this begs a massive question. If the math is so simple, and we know we just have to cast the right votes, why is it so incredibly hard? Why do our bad habits, the doom scrolling, the junk food, the procrastination, feel totally impossible to stop?
That brings us to what we can call the autopilot problem, which is rooted deeply in our neurology. There's a fascinating medical case study in the materials about a paramedic that perfectly illustrates this.
Oh, the heart attack story?
Yes. So this paramedic is at a family gathering, right? She looks across the room at her father-in-law and immediately says, your face doesn't look right. We need to go to the hospital right now.
And he felt totally fine, right?
He felt perfectly fine, but she insisted. And shortly after they arrive at the hospital, he has a massive heart attack. Now, she wasn't psychic. She had just spent decades looking at incredibly subtle visual cues of blocked arteries, blood flow changes, and impending cardiac arrest.
Wow.
Her brain processed all of that complex medical data completely unconsciously.
Her habit of diagnosing was just running in the background like a computer program using zero conscious energy.
Precisely. To understand why habits rule us, you really have to look at the brain's energy economy. The human brain is an absolute energy hog.
I think it's, what, 2% of our body weight, but uses
Uh-huh.
20% of our energy?
Exactly. Its primary evolutionary imperative is to conserve glucose so we don't starve to death. It does this by taking any repeated behavior, stripping away the conscious decision-making required in the prefrontal cortex, and pushing it down into the basal ganglia.
Which is the primitive, unconscious part of the brain.
Right. The behaviors become automatic. And the tragic irony here is that the brain's brilliant evolutionary desire for efficiency is the exact mechanism that traps us in toxic behavioral ruts.
It's trying to save us, but it's killing us.
Pretty much. You don't consciously decide to scroll on your phone for 2 hours. Your brain encounters a cue like boredom and simply executes the alleviate boredom program on autopilot to save energy.
Okay, so the brain is basically trying to be lazy to keep us alive. To fight this, we have to yank the steering wheel back from the basal ganglia to the conscious prefrontal cortex.
We have to force it into the light.
And the workbook has an exercise for this called the habit scoreboard. You literally have to carry a piece of paper and write down every single daily action and rate it. Positive, negative, or neutral based on the specific identity you're trying to build.
It sounds tedious, but it's necessary.
Making coffee? Neutral. Checking email before getting out of bed? Negative. Drinking a glass of water? Positive.
The sheer act of physical writing forces the unconscious behavior into the conscious realm. You are holding a mirror up to your automated life. You cannot change a system you refuse to acknowledge exists.
I buy that. But there's another exercise tied to this called pointing and calling. The concept is that you literally state your bad habits out loud as you do them.
This is where people get uncomfortable.
Yeah, like if I'm reaching for a donut in the office break room, I'm supposed to physically say out loud, I am eating this donut, it is full of sugar, and it is a vote against my health.
Yes, you have to vocalize it.
I have to push back on this, though. Isn't pointing and calling out loud just going to make you look completely unhinged in public? Like, if I do that in an office, HR is getting called.
Well, it might make you look eccentric, yes. But that acute social and emotional discomfort is exactly the point of the exercise.
Oh, the discomfort is the feature, not a bug.
Exactly. When a habit lives in the dark, comfortable, silent recesses of your unconscious mind, it thrives. It feels safe. It doesn't require any moral or logical defense. Pointing and calling yanks that behavior out of the shadows and forces you to confront it in the harsh, unforgiving light of reality.
Hearing your own voice say it out loud shatters the illusion.
It introduces immediate friction into the automated loop. The basal ganglia can't operate in silence anymore because the conscious brain is literally talking over it.
It's like you're short-circuiting the hardware. If you're listening to this, imagine trying to mindlessly scroll Instagram while verbally saying out loud, I am staring at a screen of strangers to avoid my own life.
Stop immediately.
It's too painful. Which actually brings us beautifully to part 2, mechanics. Because now that we understand the psychology of self-deception, we need to look at the actual architecture of automating your life.
This is where we get into the nuts and bolts.
Right. And to understand the mechanics of human behavior, we surprisingly have to go back to the late 19th century, specifically 1898, to a scientist named Edward Thorndike and a bunch of very frustrated cats.
Poor cats. But Thorndike's experiments are literally the bedrock of behavioral psychology. He built these intricate wooden puzzle boxes and placed hungry cats inside them.
Okay.
To escape and reach a bowl of fish placed just outside, the cat had to perform a specific, somewhat complex action, like pressing a lever or pulling a loop of string.
And initially they just panicked, right?
Yeah, at first they'd behave exactly as you'd expect, thrashing around randomly, clawing at the corners, biting the wood. But eventually, by pure chaotic accident, a cat would hit the lever, the door would spring open, and it would get the reward.
And then, importantly, he put them right back in the box.
He did, and he timed them. With each subsequent repetition, the random thrashing decreased, and the deliberate action increased. The cats learned, mechanically, that a specific behavior solved their immediate problem and delivered a reward.
So the useless behaviors were pruned away, and the successful one was reinforced.
Exactly. And this led to the discovery of the foundational four-step framework of the habit loop. Cue, craving, response, reward.
Let's really break those 4 steps down, because this is the operating system of your life.
Absolutely.
So the cue is the trigger. It signals your brain to initiate a behavior. It's a bit of information that predicts a reward, like seeing a notification on your phone or smelling a bakery.
Right, it kicks off the loop.
Then the craving is the underlying motivational force. You have to understand, you don't crave smoking a cigarette. You crave the chemical relief of nicotine. You don't crave brushing your teeth. You crave the feeling of clean mouth.
It's the state change you're after.
Exactly. The response is the actual physical habit you perform. And the reward is the end goal, which satisfies the craving and, most importantly, teaches your brain to remember this exact loop for next time.
And this four-step loop forms the basis of the 4 laws of behavior change. They dictate every action you take.
Okay, lay out the laws.
If you want to build a good habit, you must make the cue obvious, the craving attractive, the response easy, and the reward satisfying.
And for bad habits.
You simply invert the laws. Make the cue invisible, the craving unattractive, the response difficult, and the reward unsatisfying.
So let's look at Law 1, make it obvious, and Law 2, make it attractive. This completely shatters the myth of willpower for me. I look at people who I think are super disciplined, the people who wake up at 5 a.m., run 10 miles, and only eat kale, and I feel a deep sense of moral failure.
A lot of people do.
But the brutal truth is, they don't necessarily have superior self-control. They just don't keep cookies on their kitchen counter. They live in an environment entirely devoid of temptation. We moralize discipline when we should really be analyzing environmental design.
It is a profound realization that absolves a lot of unnecessary guilt. We think discipline is a virtue, like a character trait you are either born with or you aren't.
Exactly like eye color.
Right. But extensive psychological studies consistently show that highly disciplined people don't actually use willpower more often than anyone else. They simply structure their lives to require less of it.
Willpower is a muscle that gets tired.
It fatigues throughout the day. If you have to walk past a box of donuts on your kitchen counter 50 times a day, eventually your willpower will fail, and you will eat one.
So fix the environment.
Yes. If you want to read more, leaving a book on your pillow makes the cue obvious. If you want to eat less junk food, not bringing it into the house makes the cue invisible. It is environmental architecture, not moral certitude.
And the workbook has a specific tool for this called an implementation intention. It basically forces you to strip away all the vague ambiguity we use to lie to ourselves.
No more, I'll try to work out more.
Right. Instead of that generic nonsense, you say, I will do 20 minutes of yoga at 7 a.m. in the living room. You define the exact time and the space.
It removes the decision fatigue.
Yeah. And then there's habit stacking, which is my absolute favorite. You link a new, fragile habit to an existing, deeply automated one. After I brush my teeth, which I already do, without thinking I'll meditate for exactly 2 minutes.
Habit stacking is neurologically brilliant because it leverages the momentum you've already built in your brain. The established habit acts as a built-in, frictionless cue.
It's like piggybacking.
Exactly. However, there is a dark side to this connectivity. Behaviors don't exist in a vacuum, and this introduces what we call the Diderot effect.
Oh, the Diderot effect is terrifying. I'll explain this one because the history is so beautifully ironic.
Go for it.
It's named after the French philosopher Denis Diderot. He lived his whole life in poverty, but then Catherine the Great of Russia heard about him and basically bought his entire library, giving him a massive sum of money.
He was suddenly rich.
Suddenly loaded. So what does he do? He buys this beautiful, lavish scarlet robe, but then he puts the robe on, looks around his dingy apartment, and realizes his old rug looks terrible next to the majestic new robe.
So he needs a new rug.
Naturally. So he buys a new rug from Damascus. Then his chair looked out of place, so he bought a leather chair. Then a new desk. He essentially bankrupted himself, upgrading his entire life to match the robe.
It is the psychological spiral of consumption. One purchase dictates the next purchase to maintain a cohesive identity. And this applies perfectly to habits.
Because bad habits stack too.
Exactly. A bad habit rarely exists in isolation. It usually stacks with others in a cascading sequence. You stay up late watching one more episode, which makes you sleep through your alarm, which makes you rush in the morning, which makes you skip making a healthy lunch, which makes you buy fast food at noon.
The dominoes just fall.
You can stack yourself into a nightmare just as easily as you can stack yourself into success. You have to be deeply aware of the initial domino.
Okay, so that covers making the cue obvious. But what about Law 2? Make it attractive. Why are our bad habits so incredibly alluring in the first place? Why does scrolling TikTok feel so much better than reading a book?
To understand this, we have to talk about biology and supernormal stimuli. There's this classic behavioral experiment with the gray lag goose. A mother goose is hardwired to roll her eggs back into the nest if they happen to fall out. But researchers found that if they placed a larger artificial object near the nest, like a billiard ball or even a volleyball,
Oh, wow, wait, a
a
volleyball.
literal volleyball, the goose would completely ignore her actual egg and desperately try to roll the massive volleyball into the nest instead.
That is hilarious, but why?
Because the goose's brain is programmed with a simple rule. Round thing near nest equals egg, bigger round thing equals better egg. The larger the object, the more desperate the biological drive became. The researchers essentially hacked the goose's neurology.
Q was supercharged.
Exactly. The brain is wired to respond to certain cues, and if you artificially amplify those cues beyond what exists in nature, the biological response goes into absolute overdrive.
And we are the geese. Modern junk food, social media algorithms, video games, they're all supernormal stimuli.
Precisely. A potato chip is engineered with an exact, mathematically perfect ratio of salt, sugar, and fat that simply does not exist anywhere in the natural world.
The bliss point.
The bliss point, yes. Your brain's dopamine receptors, which evolved to reward you for finding calorie-dense berries in a harsh winter, go into an absolute frenzy when they encounter a Dorito. We are fighting millions of years of evolutionary programming when we try to resist these engineered temptations. Our hardware cannot handle the modern software.
So how do we fight back and make the good stuff attractive? The strategy here in the workbook is temptation bundling. You pair an action you want to do with an action you need to do.
Right, linking them together.
For example, I have a rule. I am only allowed to listen to my favorite true crime podcast while I'm doing the dishes or folding laundry. It forces the intense dopamine hit of the entertainment to biologically rub off on the boring chore. I actually look forward to doing the dishes now.
You are artificially manufacturing the craving, which brings us logically to laws 3 and 4. Make it easy and make it satisfying. Because even if you've made the cue obvious and you've bundled your temptations to make the habit attractive, if the action itself requires too much effort, you still won't do it.
We are fundamentally lazy.
We are. This is governed by the law of least effort. Human beings, like all biological organisms, are fundamentally driven to conserve energy.
I want to bring in this mind-blowing analogy from the book Guns, Germs, and Steel that the workbook references. It explains the spread of human agriculture, but it maps perfectly onto how we build habits.
That's a great comparison.
So in Europe and Asia, the landmass stretches out horizontally east to west. This meant that early farmers could migrate horizontally for thousands of miles, staying in roughly the same climate, the same latitude, experiencing the same seasons. Their crops still grew perfectly.
Right, the environment remained constant.
But in the Americas, the landmass runs vertically, north to south. If you try to move agriculture from Mexico down to Peru, you have to pass through a dozen radically different climates. Deserts, jungles, mountains. Every time you cross a latitude, you have to invent entirely new farming techniques.
And the historical result of that topography. Agriculture spread like wildfire across Europe and Asia, but moved at an agonizing crawl in the Americas.
Because of the friction.
Exactly. Because the east-west axis was the path of absolute least resistance. There was no environmental friction. And human behavior operates on the exact same topographical logic.
We want the east-west axis.
Your brain will always seek it. If a new habit requires you to navigate a dozen different cognitive climates, like finding your gym clothes, driving in rush hour traffic, figuring out a workout routine, showering, the brain registers way too much friction and just shuts the behavior down to conserve glucose.
So the mandate is addition by subtraction. We have to relentlessly remove the cognitive and physical friction from our good habits. If you want to go for a run at 6 a.m., sleep in your gym clothes. Put your shoes literally blocking the door.
Lower the barrier to entry.
But it goes even deeper than that with what is called the 2-minute rule.
Ah, yes. The 2-minute rule is perhaps one of the most mechanically vital insights we can discuss today. You take whatever ambitious habit you want to build and aggressively scale it down until it takes 2 minutes or less to do.
So read a book before bed becomes read exactly 1 page.
Yes. Do a 30-minute yoga routine becomes take the yoga mat out of the closet and roll it out.
I'm going to be honest. When I first read that, I thought it sounded ridiculous. Logically, putting a yoga mat on the floor doesn't burn calories.
Yeah.
How does tricking myself into doing 2 minutes of practically nothing actually lead to a physical transformation? It feels like fake progress.
It feels fake if you focus on the outcome, but remember, we aren't focusing on the outcome, we are focusing on the system.
Right.
The psychology here centers on the legendary choreographer Twyla Tharp. She had a brutal, hours-long daily workout regimen. But she famously stated her actual habit wasn't the agonizing hours at the gym. The habit was simply stepping out of her apartment onto the cold street and hailing the cab to take her to the gym. That was the decisive moment.
The cognitive friction isn't the 2 hours of sweating. It's the transition from warm apartment to cold street.
Precisely. The brain calculates the caloric cost of the start. What Twyla Tharp understood is that a habit must be firmly established before it can be improved or optimized.
You can't optimize a habit that doesn't exist.
Exactly. If you cannot master the simple art of showing up for 2 minutes, you will never master the 30-minute workout. You are automating the entry point. Once you are physically in the cab or once the yoga mat is on the floor, the path of least resistance shifts.
Oh, I see. It actually becomes harder to put the mat away without stretching than it is to just do a quick pose.
Yes, you bypass the brain's defense mechanisms.
You sneak past the guard at the gate. And once we actually do the thing, we need law of 4. Make it satisfying. This is the cardinal rule of behavior change. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided.
It's all about immediate reinforcement.
There's a deeply illuminating story in the workbook about Stephen Luby, a public health worker operating in Karachi, Pakistan. The citizens of a specific neighborhood knew they should wash their hands to prevent disease. They understood the science.
The knowledge was there.
But the knowledge wasn't enough.
Yeah.
The habit wouldn't stick, and disease rates were high. So Luby partnered with a major corporation to provide premium, nice-smelling, rapidly foaming soap to the neighborhood.
And almost overnight, hand-washing rates skyrocketed and disease plummeted.
Just because of the soap.
Yes. The intellectual knowledge of preventing disease wasn't a strong enough reward because it was abstract and delayed. The sensory pleasure of the foaming, beautiful-smelling soap was immediate.
That delayed reward is the killer.
The core problem with almost all good habits, dieting, investing, studying, is that the reward is delayed. You eat a salad today, you don't get a six-pack tomorrow. You save $100 today, you earn a millionaire tomorrow.
So we give up.
We are evolutionarily mismatched for delayed gratification. Our ancestors needed to survive the day, not plan a 401k. To make a good habit stick, you have to artificially attach a small, immediate reward to it to bridge that temporal gap.
Okay, so we've established the foundation, and we've mapped out the brutal mechanics. This brings us to part 3, transformation. How do we synthesize all of this to actually become someone new over the long term?
This is where we cross from theory into long-term reality.
Right, and the absolute biggest trap we face here is confusing being in motion with taking action.
Oh, this is a devastatingly common trap. Being in motion is researching the best possible running shoes, reading 10 contradictory articles on the keto diet, or drafting a massive list of potential clients for your business.
It feels like work.
It does, but taking action is actually putting on whatever shoes you have and going for a run, eating a single healthy meal, or picking up the phone and making a sales call.
I am so incredibly guilty of this. If you are listening, look at your own life right now. How many Notion boards or perfectly color-coded spreadsheets do you have for projects you haven't actually started?
Probably a lot.
Motion feels exactly like progress. It floods your brain with the feeling of productivity. But really, motion is just a very safe, socially acceptable form of procrastination.
That's exactly what it is.
You cannot fail while you're researching. You don't face rejection while organizing your desk. You only risk failure when you transition into action.
And from a strictly neurological standpoint, motion does absolutely nothing to build habits. Action physically changes the brain. This is governed by Hebb's law, a core principle in neuroscience.
Neurons that fire together wire together.
Yes. When you perform a new action, a tiny electrical signal passes between neurons. It's weak. But every single time you repeat that physical action, the biological pathway undergoes what is called long-term potentiation.
The physical structure changes.
Literally. The myelin sheath, which is the fatty insulation surrounding the axon of the neuron, literally, physically thickens. The pathway becomes faster, more efficient, and structurally permanent. Habits are forged strictly by the frequency of physical repetition, not by the amount of time you spend planning them or even how many days you've been trying to do them. It is about the number of reps, period.
But let's be real. Sometimes, even knowing the neuroscience, even setting up the environment, we still sabotage ourselves. The old pathways are too sick.
They are deeply entrenched.
Which is why we need commitment devices. This is about making your bad habits mathematically, physically, or socially impossible to execute. I love the historical example of the cash register.
The cash register perfectly illustrates a commitment device. It wasn't actually invented to make the checkout process faster or easier for the customer.
Wait, really? I always assumed it was for efficiency.
No, it was invented in the 1800s to stop employees from relentlessly stealing from business owners. Before the register, money just sat in an open wooden drawer. Theft was incredibly easy. It was the path of least resistance.
Too much temptation.
Exactly. The cash register changed the architecture of the transaction. It visually displayed the price, recorded the exact amount, and locked the cash away in a steel box. It added immense physical and social friction to the bad habit of theft. It removed the option.
We have to do this to ourselves. There is this extreme, almost terrifying analogy in the workbook by Roger Fisher, a renowned nuclear strategist during the Cold War.
Oh, this is a dark one.
It is dark, but it makes the point. He proposed that the United States nuclear launch codes shouldn't be kept in a sterile briefcase. He suggested the codes should be surgically implanted in a little capsule next to the heart of a volunteer, and that volunteer must follow the president everywhere. If the president decides he wants to launch a nuclear bomb and kill millions of people, he cannot just push a detached button. He has to take a butcher knife, physically kill this innocent volunteer himself, and dig the codes out of the man's chest.
It is a shocking, visceral image, but it highlights the exact core issue of human behavior. When the consequences of our actions are distant, abstract, or hidden, we act recklessly.
The separation from the consequence is the problem.
Right. We eat the junk food because the heart attack is 20 years away. Fisher's proposal forces immediate, bloody, painful, personal friction onto the action. It forces you to immediately feel the cost of your choice.
So applying this to our infinitely lower stakes lives, we create habit contracts. We give a trusted friend $500 and say, if I smoke a cigarette this month, you must donate this money to a political organization I absolutely despise.
Make it hurt right now.
But let me ask you a philosophical question. Are we really so fundamentally flawed, so pathetic, that we need the threat of extreme financial loss or public humiliation just to go for a jog or eat a vegetable?
It's not a flaw, and it's certainly not pathetic. It is simply a feature of our biology.
A feature, not a bug.
Exactly. We are operating ancient hardware designed for the Pleistocene era, a world of absolute scarcity in a modern world of endless, hyper-engineered temptation and abundance. A habit contract isn't an admission of moral weakness. It is a profound strategic acknowledgement of how human nature actually works. You are using the system to beat the system. You are aligning your immediate incentives with your long-term identity.
Okay, so let's say we get the system working. We've hacked our environment. We are taking action. The neurons are wiring together. How do we keep it going long-term without burning out or getting incredibly bored?
We need the Goldilocks rule and variable rewards.
Explain the Goldilocks rule.
The Goldilocks rule dictates how to maintain flow state and long-term motivation. Human beings experience peak motivation when working on tasks that are right on the absolute edge of their current abilities. Not too hard, not too easy, just right.
Like playing a game against someone your own skill level.
Exactly. If you are learning to play tennis and you play against a toddler, you get bored immediately. If you play against Serena Williams, you get crushed and demotivated. You need to play someone who is exactly your equal, where success is possible but not guaranteed, to stay locked in.
And to keep the brain hooked, you introduce variable rewards. This is the slot machine psychology.
Precisely. The dopamine system doesn't just reward pleasure, it rewards anticipation and prediction errors. If a slot machine paid out $1 every single time you pulled the lever, you'd eventually get bored of it. It would just become a mundane job.
Predictability kills the thrill.
But because it pays out unpredictably, maybe 50% of the time you lose, maybe you get a small win, maybe you hit the massive jackpot, your dopamine system is hijacked. The uncertainty is the addiction.
So how do we use that for good habits?
We use it by intentionally varying our routines, our routes, and our rewards. If your workout is exactly the same every day, the brain automates it and gets bored. You have to keep the neurology guessing.
But as we optimize, we also have to face a harsh reality about who we are biologically. We have to talk about genetics and talent.
The elephant in the room.
Yeah, there's this myth in our culture that anyone can be anything if they just work hard enough. The workbook uses Michael Phelps as an example. Phelps is an unparalleled swimmer, but look at his biology. He has the long torso of a man who is 6'8", but the remarkably short legs of a man who is 5'10".
And the double-jointed ankles.
Right. He is literally biologically engineered to be a hydrodynamic torpedo in the pool.
Yeah.
If you took him and put him in a marathon Against an elite runner like Hicham El Garouge, who has incredibly long legs and a short torso, Phelps would lose terribly.
It raises a critical, often ignored point. Genes absolutely matter. We all have biological predispositions, often framed by the big five personality traits: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
So we can't just copy someone else's routine.
No, the great irony of habit formation is that you cannot blindly copy someone else's successful routine. You must ruthlessly audit your own biology and psychology. If you are naturally highly introverted and score low on extroversion, do not try to build a fitness habit around massive, loud group workout classes. You will quit. Play a game where the biological odds are in your favor.
But there is a danger even when you find your perfect game and achieve success. It's called the red of mastery.
Yes. When a habit becomes completely automated, when the myelin sheath is fully thickened, we stop paying attention to it. We plateau.
We just drift.
This is where we fall victim to Goodhart's law, which states, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. If your entire focus is simply doing 100 push-ups every single day, the number becomes the target. You stop paying attention to your form, your elbows flare out, and you eventually ruin your rotator cuffs. Mastery requires continuous, conscious refinement, not just mindless repetition.
And that ties perfectly into the ultimate danger, tying your entire identity to one single habit.
Identity diversification is essential.
Right, because if your entire sense of self, your only identity vote is, I am a marathon runner, what happens when you step off a curb and blow out your knee? You don't just lose a hobby, you suffer a complete existential crisis.
Your identity is destroyed.
The workbook argues for identity diversification. You shouldn't just be a marathon runner. You should be someone who values mental grit and physical challenge. If the knee goes, you can pivot to cycling or swimming without losing your foundational identity.
It is the ultimate evolution of the entire process we've discussed. You build the mechanical habit to change the identity, but you must ensure the resulting identity is robust enough to survive when the environment inevitably changes.
All right. We have journeyed through the foundational psychology, the brutal neurology of the mechanics, and the philosophy of transformation. Now, we're going to do something a little different.
This is an important shift.
If you are listening, stop whatever else you were focusing on. We are going to give you a few short audio clips. Take these sound bites, loop them in your head, and let them dismantle your excuses.
Let the distillation begin.
One sentence that will change how you see habits. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems.
Stop setting finite, leaky bucket goals that treat the symptoms of your life.
Every single physical action you take is an atomic vote for the exact person you wish to become. Stop voting for your own failure.
The illusion of discipline is just that, an illusion born of ego.
You are not a morally weak, defective person. You are simply living in an environment flawlessly designed to trigger your absolute worst impulses.
Stop trying to out-willpower an engineered supernormal stimulus. Redesign your room, throw out the friction, and you will fundamentally redesign your life.
It all comes down to the decisive moment. You are paralyzed with inaction because you are staring at the massive 30-minute mountain of effort.
Stop staring at the mountain. You have exactly 2 minutes to put on your shoes, step out the door, and cross the threshold.
That microaction is the only habit that actually matters. Stop seeking the safety of motion and expose yourself to the risk of action.
Finally, recognize the pain of failure relative to expectation. You suffer deeply because you expect linear, immediate perfection in an exponential delayed return world.
The dopamine hit isn't coming today. Accept the boring, repetitive, quiet reality of the work. The neurons will wire together in the dark long before you ever see the light. Listen, then ask yourself, am I ready?
That is the ultimate crux of the material, isn't it? The brutal reality of the full journey.
It really is.
To truly change, you must audit your foundational underlying identity. You have to hack the mechanical, biological, energy-saving loops of your own basal ganglia. And you have to construct an external environment where failure is mathematically and physically more difficult than success.
Exactly. There is absolutely no generic advice here. We are actively mocking the idea of just trying harder tomorrow. Tomorrow doesn't care about your effort. It only cares about your systems.
The system is everything.
If the system doesn't change, the person doesn't change. You will simply run the exact same autopilot loop, driven by the exact same unconscious cues, until the day you die.
So I have to ask you, looking directly at your own life right now, what's the one habit you're avoiding because it would actually change you?
That is a question that requires terrifying, absolute honesty to answer.
Let us know. Comment below. Which part of the workbook hit you hardest?